Part of what we love about speculative fiction is the fact that we can explore worlds and ideas that you can't in real life. And building stories around these elements is where the fun is.
It's about more than just places and technology. When you build new and unique places and groups of people, it allows you to analyze and dissect real world issues from a safe lens.
However, there is a concerning current trend in media when it comes to intelligent non human species, and that's sexualizing them. This issue has grown increasingly strange over the years,
And it's gotten so strange that it's at a place we would refer to as lusting after strange flesh.
which should concern Christian creators and consumers. So let's talk about it. So, once again, I'm here with my buddy. Once again,
I'm no longer brother, I'm buddy.
you're being promoted. Once again, I'm here with my brother Glenn. In case you guys don't know, everything that's done on this channel is the two of us. Everything from the research, planning the videos, editing them. It's the two of us. And if you're new to this channel, I'm Ginger. That's Glenn. And we are Christian creators. And while we don't create specifically for a Christian audience outside of this YouTube channel, our YouTube channel is dedicating to helping other Christian creators to create wonderful stories that could appeal to either a Christian or a secular audience, but either way, that would not introduce any sort of dangerous anti-biblical mindsets. So today we're going to talk about what is strange flesh and why we should be concerned about it.
The short answer to the question of what is strange flesh is any sexual desire that goes against God's natural ordained order.
So what is God's natural order? We see it as early as Genesis 1 in the foundation of creation itself. God creates the sky, the earth, the waters, and he creates animals and plants according to their kind. There is a clear distinction made between creatures in creation.
Now, I know by man's categorizations, we all are familiar with the idea that humans fall under the category of mammals. But anyone knows it, humans are different from other animals, and biblically we see that God makes man and woman in his own image. There's a clear separation biblically of humanity from every other creature in creation.
And then God tells man and women to be fruitful and multiply. So we see that outright humanity is separated from the rest of creation, and they do have a responsibility to be fruitful and multiply. Now, before any of you runs off to the comments, I'm not saying you have to have kids or you're outside of God's will. Like that's not what we're saying here. But this is important to understand for the sake of when we get to Genesis 6.
And when we get to Genesis 6, we see the sons of God, aka angels, find that human women are beautiful and decide they want to take wives from among them. They come down, take their wives, and produce half angel, half human offspring that come to be known as the Nephilim, or giants.
And this is a strange flesh corruption that went completely outside of God's design. And then if you jump to Genesis 19, with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, we see again a strange flesh issue, along with some other issues.
Yeah, they're bad people.
Hopefully, you're familiar with the story where Sodom and Gomorrah is going to be destroyed because of their wickedness, and a lot of it has to do with sexual immorality, among other things. And the moment that angels enter into the city, the people find them to be so attractive that they try to take them forcefully.
And then, once again, all the way in the New Testament, in the book of Jude, this whole concept is reiterated by Jude one more time, where he kind of recounts the cost of pursuing after strange flesh and reminds readers of the destruction that came with it and how even angels are locked in chains and darkness because of what they did. So, the reason we bring all of these examples up and the reiteration of it is to highlight that for Christians, this is a topic that actually holds a lot of weight spiritually, and we should be mindful of it.
You may have an idea of where we're going with this, but just hang on, let us cook.
Things have gotten a lot stranger than you might realize.
A lot. Now, when it comes to fiction, we've talked about this before on the channel, or I have a video where I talk about that fiction in general acts like a flight simulator for people. It helps people navigate life, but it also has messages. It inspires people. It influences people for good and for worse. And so that's really what we talk about a lot on this channel, is how can we create interesting and cool stories without crossing lines that would be dangerous. And this is what this video is about. And we're really going to get into that now. So the idea of strange flesh is not just in biblical literature. We also see this in ancient literature and mythologies as well. And is it ever a good thing?
No.
No.
So, anyone familiar with mythology is familiar with demigods, God and human offspring. You've also probably seen things like the Minotaur and other events like Europa, if you know the name. She lusts after a literal bull. And there's a lot of this in mythology. So, the issue's been ingrained for a long time.
Even in King Arthur legends, there is a lot of sort of strange flesh issues.
And largely they aren't really condemned. Knights of the Round Table do fall in love with fairies, and fairies fall in love with them. Merlin is, in some of the older versions, he is the child of a human woman and an incubus demon, who was then supposed to be the Antichrist, but because of timely baptism, he was spared of that, but maintains his powers.
So we even see in early literature that this is popping up. It's nothing new in literature, so don't think it is, but it's gotten pretty bad. Now, first, I want to address the allegorical kind of problem.
It's not super popular today, but it used to be.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the use of different species in fantasy stories or sci-fi stories with aliens or robots that had great allegorical use. And this used to be the most popular way to use it, especially when things like racism and prejudices were a really, really big issue. It was a good way to get rid of a modern bias that people might have had and look at issues through a new lens. And that's one of the great things about fantasy. And we've said that before in different videos, that you have the power to do that. But I found that most stories written now are not using it in allegorical ways.
No.
And honestly, I would like to see more stories where they're afraid to not use them in an anyway, well, that's a whole other thing. We'll just leave it
What?
alone. Well, okay, so there's a lot of people who aren't using it for allegory, but then people will read into it and think it's allegory and be like, "Oh, you're being racist," but it's like literally
You're
not.
projecting.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like to see more of where like magic creatures are actually just very other or very like not human
Man,
without it being tied up into that.
I would love to see some classic like interpretations of these creatures being other. Like there's a
Mhm.
unique terror in something that looks so human, but is mentally and spiritually so other.
Yeah, so if you got stories like that, like let us know because I would love to read more where that is the case. So back to how these species and races, fantasy races, are being used today. They're more as human plus. They're like looked at as cool. You see, like vampires are cooler versions of humans, or shifters, or elves, and then more. And the consequence of this human plus and cooler version is that people have now developed a romantic attraction to these fictional beings. Once again, there's probably gonna be people in the comments, it's just fiction. Okay. Many people can engage with fiction in a healthy way, and I've seen where many cannot. And that's what we're talking about here is what happens when our media is so saturated with this that people are being affected by
Right. So many people want to say, "Oh, it'd never be me," but that's good.
it. Hopefully it would never be you.
This is for those that unfortunately it is them.
And I have a video where I talk a bit about the weight of Christian creators. And there is a difference between as a Christian consumer and a Christian creator. There's definitely lines where as either or we shouldn't cross, but as creators, we need to be even more mindful of what we're making because it does influence other people. And that's what we talk about on this channel. So it's no secret that sex sells. It's kind of an industry media standard. No matter what form of entertainment you're in, it helps sell. But as Christians, we know that that is not a mindset we can rightfully adopt. which means we have to be even better when we make our work because we're not relying on the cheap sexual draw.
So when you have monsters and they're actually being monsters, you typically find them in two styles. The monster is truly monstrous and like a horrible creature, probably kept off camera until the finale so the fear factor can remain. Or they are deceptively beautiful, usually very human in order to lure people in like an anglerfish.
And this is a concept that you see a lot in old mythology, especially like with the Fae, that they're these ethereal, beautiful creatures, but they're actually very
Malicious.
malicious. Yeah. And so there is nothing wrong with that depiction of monsters. We'll be clear there. But go on.
So there's nothing wrong with that depiction, but that is also the beginning of the troubles. A lot of the time when a monster is beautiful or handsome, they by design need to be the most beautiful or handsome person in the story to illustrate the point, the danger, and the appeal. But I've seen over time where a lot of people have grown annoyed that the best looking person is evil, dangerous, wants to kill you, eat you, enslave you, do horrible things to you. And inevitably, that leads to people going, what if they didn't?
We have this kind of innate trait in us as humans where we want beautiful things
Be good.
to be good, but Satan comes as an angel of light, you guys.
And so, when you have your beautiful monsters no longer needing to be a true villain, it doesn't take a whole lot of extra steps to go from, oh, they're misunderstood or they're good to, oh, they are an appropriate object of my romantic desire now,
And they're cooler than humans now because they've got
right?
powers or eternal life or something.
So, how unreasonable are these lesser, ugly, dingy humans than the beautiful, still righteous other being?
There is a hint of a transhumanism problem in there, but
That's a
that's a
whole
whole
other
other thing.
conversation.
So, like we said, originally fairies were fickle creatures that just tortured humans because they thought it was fun. They didn't see anything wrong with it, which is what makes them scary.
I was like, nowadays, I'd say they're more typically just kind of airheads.
Fairies?
Yeah.
Oh no, you haven't been reading
Oh
the
well, okay,
modern
yeah,
fairies.
no, there's that side of things too. I was thinking more innocent stories, but
That's true. Like Peter Pan-ish. Well, I don't know. Tinkerbell.
she was malicious,
We're gonna
but
cut this out. Let's see what's
yeah,
malicious.
okay.
All right. So where once fairies were malicious and beautiful, we're now seeing in a lot of romantasy where fairies are the object of desire and people become fairies that were once human. I am not ragging on romantasy. So don't come in my comments trashing romantasy because as a genre, I do like it. It's not my number one because I do prefer romance as a subplot most of the time, but it like don't come in here trashing that. We don't do that here. We don't trash genres
Unless it's smut.
unless it's smut. Sorry, it's porn. Go watch that video where I talk about that. And as for like vampires, they're literally animated corpses. Twilight is really the thing. And Rice, honestly, I think it really started kind of
It
with
started
Anne
with
Rice.
Anne Rice, but then Twilight took it to like a general audience.
And yeah, that is true because Anne Rice was a niche kind of audience. Twilight really popularized it. Then we had all the kind of
Yeah,
Right.
Anne Rice beautified them. Twilight romanticized them.
And then they became mainstream. And now they're still a staple in paranormal romance along with werewolves. And of course, there's other countless monstrous creatures throughout mythology that do pop up in the fantasy genres, um, even with the creature being romanticized. Things like sirens, gorgons, sorry, even mermaids. I'm not saying Little Mermaid is evil. Don't go running around saying I said that because that's not what I said. There's nuance. Listen, just hang with us. Of course, then there's also things like Lamia and Succubus. Those are bad. Sorry, those are bad. And all of these either have their turn in the big spotlight or they do have a niche audience who enjoys these. There is a niche audience for kind of each of these creatures when it comes to them being the object of a romance or lust.
Although book recommendations from things like Facebook probably make you think it's everybody's niche.
Fortunately, my algorithm, let's talk about Facebook algorithm for a moment there. Just because I am a woman of my age who likes to read, they're like, maybe you would like werewolf smut. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy, and my Facebook knows I like books, and it knows I like games, And so like suddenly I get recommended these like monster harem lit RPGs and I'm like, man, and gaming, that's the only benchmark for this?
That's a whole other thing. That's a tangent. We won't go down that one.
Now this is where we're gonna get maybe a little more controversial. The issue of why is romanticizing these creatures and romance with these creatures a problem? Remember at the beginning of the video, the strange flesh issue and the disasters and issues that caused. And you keep in mind Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. And if you remember all the instances from Genesis and Jude's recounting of the costs, dwelling on monster romance is a strange flesh issue, and it is none of these things.
So before we get into just how dark it's gotten, let's start a little bit light. Let's start with waifus.
So, for any of you that have avoided anime culture, I'm maybe envious, I'm not sure. But a waifu is a cartoon character that people really like, enjoy, find attractive, or like their characterization. And on one hand, a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, that's my waifu, to express they really like the character. And for others, there is a growing epidemic in some parts of the world where a waifu is a bit more. Instances where some people have liked characters so much, they've had weddings to these characters. And in Japan, there are resorts that have set up spots where people can have barcodes to take photos with certain common waifu characters. And these people having like parasocial relationships with cartoons.
It is extremely unhealthy. Now, before any of you think we're coming at anime, we actually like anime. What anime does well, it does really well, and what it does not do well, and where it's bad, it's really bad. So honestly, we don't watch a lot of it anymore. After we're gonna have a testimony video coming up where we're really gonna talk about why we decided, like, why the importance of this channel to us, like why are we committed to this. But don't think we hate anime. Everything that we criticize here or we talk about is stuff that we either like or we've had experience with that we used to like. So don't think we hate anime.
We we've engaged with a lot of things we're talking about and pulled away from it when we realized problems. We love the anime style. We really don't watch it anymore.
I'll say there's a few movies and stuff that are okay, but
Yeah,
they're so hard to find, and most of the time I don't even want to.
watch them.
I don't even want to bother sifting through them. But this idea of that kind of waifu culture, the culture, the waifu culture. This also it feeds in with video games as well, especially with dating sims, where really the sole object of the game is a romance. And this is mentally very dangerous because you're engaging with especially if these are like the games that you play all the time,
Right.
it's you're simulating a romance that's never going to exist, and people do get overly attached to these characters or very obsessed with these games, and they forsake the real world and real relationships for these digital ones.
With the actually, speaking of, with the rise of AI, we've been seeing a lot more people having these fictional AI chats with supposed characters they like, and there have been a number of reports of people falling in love with these AI versions of characters.
Even breaking up with their real relationships, like their real marriages, and
Right.
so there are real world consequences to it. It's not just us being a stick in the mud. Now, I'm not saying that you can't play maybe I do feel like playing the games are a slippery slope, but are they going to give you disorder thinking if you play one? Probably not. And having a romantic subplot in a video game is not a bad thing as long as you're not obsessing over these things and they don't get into weird flesh.
My my personal stance on this issue, a video game with a romantic subplot, not an issue. But when you have video games where you as a player have to be the one investing time and emotion into the romantic subplot, where you get to feel like you are the one pursuing someone, for a lot of people, that's not going to be a problem. But I have known far too many who put very real emotions into these and had very real obsessions with many characters.
So if you are a Christian creator and you're trying to make video games, it's probably best to stay away from those kind of genres and to have a fixed romance in a storyline instead of having options, just so you're looking out for other consumers and making sure that they're not getting into an unhealthy way with these characters. And I talk about that really in my video where I talk about our responsibility as creators. So if you want to know a little bit more of the nuance and where everything falls, go check that video out. But
I'll also say a fixed romance makes a cohesive sequel significantly easier.
it does. So if you think about sequels, having a fixed romance makes that easier. So going along with that, when we're talking about waifu culture, a lot of the time these are human characters, even if they're animated. But they're not only that. We're seeing more and more where they're non-humans.
Non-humans have been pretty popular for a while. And there's a whole dating sim about birds. I don't know the full extent of how where it goes, but I know it's a dating sim and everybody's a actual bird.
Oh, okay. Just drop that on me. Oh man. Okay, so there are plenty of games though that are going outside the realm of humans, which gets even to stranger flesh than a cartoon. And one is the runaway hit.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Now, I'm going to say this just as a public service announcement. If you are a Christian, once again, we love video games. We love them. But if part of your custom creation is to customize your genitals, we should not be buying that and supporting those creators. That is never should be in a game. But go on, Glenn. Tell us about Baldur's Gate 3.
So, if you're familiar with the game, even in passing, you might be aware of what we're about to talk about. But there is in the game a character who you can romance who has the ability to shapeshift into animals. He's a druid, classic D&D style, turns animals. But that's where the problems really begin. All of the romances, they very quickly turn sexual in every instance. And with this particular character, you have an option where he gets excited and he accidentally turns into a bear. And then you have the choice to say, "Oh, I want to make love with you as a human," or "Oh, be the bear." And while you don't see the actions on screen, you are making a choice to say, "I want to have sex with a bear."
That's gross.
It is zoophilia.
And there's plenty of people in the secular world who has been like, yeah, it's weird, but they brush it off. That's not something we should be brushing off. We should be calling out how disgusting that is. That's how you know we have become so desensitized as a society that we would just go, yeah, it's weird, but we're still going to play the game.
It's comedy.
We should be abhorred that that's even an option, that's something the designers put in the game.
Like there's so many layers to this. Like one, you're pursuing like in-game sex scenes, and then you're pursuing an animal.
Yeah, it's gross. And this is not an isolated case. At least there's plenty of shifter romance books. Now, before anyone who's into shifter romance gets in my comments and gets mad, I'm going to say this is not a common thing in shifter romance, but it's there enough and there's a niche community for it where characters have sex in one is in the shifter form. That's gross. Wait,
I mean, you're talking about you've seen books
advertisements
marketing themselves
Yeah,
on this.
they marketed themselves on this. That's how I knew they even existed because I saw advertisements for it and was horrified. Like the fact that that we've gotten this far is like Christians. We got to put our foot down. We gotta and stop supporting things that have anti-biblical messages and content in it because when you're supporting it with your money, with your time, with your promotion, you're telling these creators that's what you want more of, and they're going to make more of it.
Right. Yeah, you can You can skip chapters. You can, give your character Barbie doll body physics, not pursue the romances, but you're still investing in these products that have these things. They don't see players skipping. They see players buying the product.
Or even like with
Or
books, like
books, yeah.
people keep the reason we have so much smut in just the common fiction. Like you used to have to go to a section to get that stuff. Now it's everywhere. You can hardly pick up an adult book, like for an adult audience, not an adult book, without that content in it, because no one's put their foot down. And like Christians keep going, oh, I skip it. Oh, I don't, like, I blot it out, or it doesn't bother me. I talk about that in the Spicy Book video, but like we cannot emphasize enough that we have to put our money where our like morals are. That one just gets me really like,
Fired up.
yeah, gosh. And it gets stranger still. I mean, there's anthropomorphic animals. Beastars, for example, is extremely sexual, and they're all animals. That's pretty gross.
Yeah. Books and video games aren't alone. In movies, a lot of Western movie media, thankfully, hasn't really fallen in a lot of these trappings, but you do still have the occasional movie like The Shape of Water, which, if you've heard of it, it's pretty famous because the woman makes love to a fish monster. But, then cut back to anime, and there's a common thing called tentacle hentai, where it's literally an octopus, monstrous, animalistic tentacle that violates women. And I personally know people in real life who have seen so much of it that one, they find it funny. Two, a lot of them do find it arousing. And I've seen real people look at things like calamari and like making jokes and thinking about it. And like, it's like, I wouldn't mind if this happened to me in real life. It's just
The thing is,
seared conscience.
yeah, and it happens slowly. Most people aren't going to go from innocent childhood straight to tentacle nonsense. Uh, it is a process of desensitizing. And as Christian creators, that's what we have to be mindful about, that we're not part of that process. As a matter of fact, we want to be in the opposite end. We want to pull people out of darkness and bring them a little bit closer to the light. And we have a lot of people in our audience who think we're calling for Christians to make only Christian content. No, please make secular content that will have good, like, biblical foundations to it, to pull people out of darkness. Like we need to be in the secular
Right.
audience.
And what we really mean is not every story needs to be a faith narrative. Not every story needs to be, look what Jesus did. It can be a high fantasy, sci-fi. It can be all these other genres. Just stop compromising. And I know this topic probably sounds extreme, but we got to realize we've been so desensitized over the years to so many things that a lot of us have seared our conscience and we're just like, oh, well, it doesn't bother me, so I don't think anything about this anymore. And we got to realize, oh, no, this is not okay. My conscience is seared and I don't think anything of it. Okay, God, I need you to fix my heart.
So back to those anthropomorphic characters. It's not just Beastars. This started off very subtly too. I mean, we see it in. Do I think Bugs Bunny is bad? No. The anthropomorphic animals, I have a hard time saying that word, themselves are not a bad concept. They're a great shorthand, especially when you're talking about archetypes. Usually we have like the sly fox and innocent
Yeah,
little rabbit, right?
and slapstick comedy characters.
Right. So we're not saying that anthropomorphic characters are bad, but when they get sexualized is where it gets bad.
Very fast.
I mean, how many comments have we seen where people are like, oh, and proudly saying, oh yeah, Lola Bunny was
My
my
furry awakening.
right. Or
This did something to me, and I don't know what to do with this.
right, with like, either animated characters, the anthropomorphic characters. Another one, Crystal from Star
Star
Fox.
Fox.
Yeah,
That was another one that I've commonly seen.
yeah, and I mean they not even trying to hide it. Like they played saxophones and everything when they show her on like
Yeah.
it,
for that.
So what they're doing is it's programming your brain to associate this with sexiness. And when it's an animal, that's a problem.
And I fully believe what people are really latching onto is the human parts they see. And, these things are coded to be, oh, hey, Crystal is considered sexy to this fox man, but there are all so much humanistness in there that other people can understand and see what they're supposed to see. But then there's so much animal parts that they're also now associating with the whole of what's sexy. And then people start slowly seeing animal parts as more attractive on characters, and it just starts getting weird.
Like we said, like not everyone who watches this stuff is going to have that,
Right.
but there's been enough comments and enough like we said, like their furry awakenings or like it is a problem. Or people are like, oh, these two are hot and they're animals. I mean, we even see this like with bronies.
Ugh.
So supposedly there is a healthy version of bronies where they just liked the show, but that is
Right.
not what it is anymore.
Yeah, no, there's oh, I like the show and I'm a guy. And then there's what people typically think of.
And My Little Pony is not even anthropomorphic. Like they don't have humanoid features.
They're just horses.
They're just horses. And
If you know about the jar, I need to say nothing
uh,
more. Don't look it up if you don't know.
yeah,
Stay
please,
innocent.
just I know too much. Is there nuance here?
Once upon a time,
Maybe.
the topic of nuance in this is something we've both wrestled and gone back and forth on, and it might be best left to the individual's discernments.
From what I personally have come to the conclusion of is that we've gone so far that we really need to heavily pull back before we can really talk about nuance. Just because it's gone, our society needs a detox, especially a sexual detox. Like it's because we talked about what the safer options, like a human and an elf, or because it what's an elf
But a
in
human.
today's media? Yeah, but a human with a long life and pointy ears and nice bone.
Nice bone structure.
Yeah, nice bone structure. Um, and like this can be used responsibly, but I also see the bad side of it. I mean, I think one of the ones who really popularized it is Tolkien, and we talk about him in our fantasy video, and where he was one of the big markers of fantasy, and he was also a Christian. Well, I will say the way that he does it is a lot different than how people do now. Whereas Arwen had to give up being extra, like and become more human. Where now we see the narrative is the human is becoming like Fae or
Yeah.
elf or whatever.
People have the giving up power for a normal life used to be a pretty common trope, but people really didn't vibe with it, and so it's kind of died off.
Yeah. So is there room for nuance in here? Yes,
But
but at this point in our society, I think as Christian creators, we probably need to just keep it just humans. And I'm saying this as someone who my world had fae in humans, and it was kind of during that time that God had purged a lot of our life and was cleaning things up. And actually, you have the conviction first. Go with that one. But
so okay, so for context, I can probably retouch on this when we do the testimony video, but I've always struggled to include fantasy creatures in my world because I'm like, well, humans can do all of it just fine. And so like I always question what's the value of a fantasy race? What do they add? How do they interact? And I'm like, it just always felt messy storytelling wise for me.
on the
So, oh,
And on the other hand, I always liked the idea of fantasy races. I always thought they were just kind of cool or fun or pretty, whatever. So in my world that I was building up, I had those.
and I'll admit, part of the appeal of keeping trying to find a way to fit some fantasy races in is they're often very attractive. And, there are fun narratives that you can include when you have a human with something different about them. But ultimately, I was on a prayer walk one day, and I was just praying about the direction I needed to take my story and all these things. And I just felt God telling me, Do not make them lust after strange flesh. And for me, this was kind of a wake-up call on just the entire fantasy romance and it just kind of started a cascade of, hmm,
And so he told me about it, and I was like, well, that's your conviction, not mine. Now, real quick, I will say, you don't have to be personally convicted on something to give it up or change it. But I was working on my stuff, and I'd be like, that's his conviction, not mine. God didn't tell me that. And I felt like I'm saying, but it should be. I was like, but if I do that, I lose my whole magic system, and I'll be left with like completely gutted on how my whole story is. It'll crumble. And we'll definitely talk about that probably in the testimony video. But we realized, and it's something we had wanted to do since we were children, of how to merge our worlds together
yeah.
and write in the same world. We never could figure it out. But then I was like, I bring him religion. He brings me magic system. And now we're building a very complex world together, which is fun. But neither near or there.
I would also like to say that while our conviction resulted in us having a fantasy world of just humans, you can have worlds with all these races. Our suggestion, though, is stay away from the interspecies romance.
Because aside from lusting after strange flesh, we also don't want to make humans dissatisfied with being human. And that comes into play with these kind of characters as well.
I'm sure we all know of people who have obsessions with fairies and elves and wish they could be them. And
There's even people who've gotten body mods to look more
yeah,
other. Um, and that's definitely in a disorder, like
very
disorder.
much so.
Yeah. So, like I said, there's room for nuance, there's room for discussion, but where the clear line is definitely,
Animal parts.
yes, stay away from that. Please do not romanticize any anthropomorphic or any even, sorry, cat girls.
Yeah.
Like, we cannot sexualize animal parts.
At the end of the day, why is a cat just I know they're common, but why do people find cat girls more attractive than that character was perfectly human? It ultimately comes down to the animalistic parts, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Or you'd be like, it's not the animal parts, it's the otherness. Still a problem.
Still strange flesh.
And for me as well, I think a little bit for both of us, because I'm also an artist, this also applies to how we make art. And we're really going to talk about that when we're talking about attractive versus sexualized characters. And we're going to focus mostly on visuals for that video. That's our next video. So if you're interested in that, especially if you grew up in a toxic purity culture and or an overly sexualized culture, we address both of those issues and where that healthy, like where the healthy lines are. But so as an artist, I don't want to make people lust after drawings and cartoons or character art.
Right.
Um, so as Christians, we need to be mindful of that as well. So if you don't want to miss that video for next week, make sure you subscribe and then like and leave a nice comment if you like our content. It helps us get seen. We are still a small channel, but we are growing really fast, which is absolutely exciting.
It's been a blessing.
Yeah, it has. It's been a lot of work. So thank you everyone who's been supportive so far of our content, and go out and create some great stories, create some beautiful artwork. Bye.